Welcome to Case Closed, the Contingency Fee Podcast. On the show, our team of industry experts interviews contingency fee attorneys. You will discover everything from how they got started to the secrets of their success and what's working in today's marketplace. And now, here's the Case Closed Podcast.
Well, welcome to the Case Closed Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Clanin, and today my guest is Michael Haggard of Heckard Law Firm outside of Miami. So welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Michael. Enjoyed to be with you.
Yeah. So why don't you tell our listeners a little about you, your practice, and whatever you want to share at this moment, and then we'll get into questions.
Yeah, so I'm the managing partner of the Heckard Law Firm. We are a boutique law firm, 8 lawyers in Coral Gables, Florida, which basically is a suburb of Miami, and we have a 100% plaintiff's practice. We represent a number of crime victims. If you had to say one specialty within the specialty of personal injury and wrongful death, practiced with my father forever. My dad was my mentor and my idol, and he retired about 10 years ago. And we call ourselves a family firm. My partner, Doug McCarron's my brother-in-law, but my other partner's been with us for a long time. And we try cases. We really, really work hard. We're out in the community, and we handle cases that we feel can change society. That's one of the things we're most proud of, is that when we handle a case for a family, not only do we want to get them justice, but we want to change society and maybe corporate behavior that caused the terrible tragedy that brought them to us. And that's something we take a lot of pride in.
Wow, that's great. So let's just kind of jump into some questions here. So I know you were a public defender at one time. How did you do the transition from the public defender to becoming a manager or managing partner, of the Heckard Law Firm? And what motivated your career in personal injury law?
Yeah, so, I'll start maybe with the beginning, and that again goes back to my dad. I grew up sitting at the kitchen table at dinner, hearing about these tragedies that my dad was working on, and these families of folks that maybe were paraplegic or had lost a loved one, and how my dad was fighting so hard for them. So I understood from the outset why maybe, he was late getting home, or I couldn't see him on a weekend or something like that. So that always motivated me to try to be someone that can make a difference in our community and maybe eventually be a trial lawyer. I can tell you, through college, I didn't know what in the world I wanted to do, but I love public speaking. I love debate. I love leadership. But then again, going through law school, as much as I wanted to be a trial lawyer, I was originally going to be a state attorney. And ironically, I could say this publicly now, I got in a little trouble in law school, which led me to not go to the state attorney, but go to the public defender. And I tell every young lawyer, I would start out at the state attorney or the public defender if you want to be a trial lawyer. There's no better place to learn how to try cases and also learn how to be around real people and real problems. And so I absolutely loved it for the 2 years that I did it. But I kind of always knew I wanted to be a civil trial lawyer. And so I went out and I worked for another mentor of mine named Don Russo, who had a small PI practice handling medical malpractice and catastrophic cases. Learned from him that there is no substitute for being prepared, outworking your opponent every single case. And eventually, my dad and our partner at the time, Bob Parks, who's a legendary trial lawyer across the United States, we decided, why are we competing against each other, and why don't I join the firm? And so I joined the firm. It took a while to be a managing partner. I mean, I was a pit trial lawyer, out there every day, meeting with witnesses, trying cases, everything like that. And it's just it's been a great journey. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Wow. Can you highlight a key legislative initiative or change you've championed to support crime victims during your legal career?
Sure. So, it came about that we started handling a lot of crime victim cases with a case involving a man named Sammy Brock. Sammy was unfortunately the victim of a carjacking outside of actually a strip club in a strip mall in a small shopping center. And we brought a case for negligent security against that strip mall. The strip club had no insurance. and he was rendered a quadriplegic, a terrible case, had to go back to Tunisia. Basically had the same tracheal tube that he had 3 years later when the case went to verdict that he had when he left the hospital, which is unheard of. Those need to be changed every 6 months. So if we didn't win the case, there was no way that Sammy was going to live. And we were able to get $100 million verdict in that case. And that kind of changed a lot for our firm because then everybody started thinking of us as a crime victim firm. So what we've done with that is we've lobbied in Congress, in the state, for gun restrictions because 90% of our cases involve firearms. We've lobbied for victims' compensation so that victims can pick up their lives immediately. They can't wait like Sammy did 3 years for a $100 million verdict. That's not going to happen in every case. They have to have restitution. They have to have victims' compensation early on in their lives to pick up the pieces. I mean, being a victim of a crime is different than an auto accident. An auto accident, someone was really negligent. Although negligence is obviously involved in negligent security cases and those type of cases, but somebody did something purposefully to you. So something is taken even more deep than a regular case. And so we've been very active, obviously in Congress, but also in the state of Florida, trying to get victims' rights early, the right to participate in the criminal process. I can't tell you how many times our clients feel outside of the criminal process. And that's no offense to law enforcement or state attorneys across the state and the country, but they're tremendously swamped with 20 homicide cases at one time. Well, our victim is one case only. And so we're involved in a lot of those aspects.
Right. So you kind of mentioned the $100 million verdict. So I know you've had a couple of those, maybe 3 of those actually, but so this might be a little redundant. Maybe you can touch on the same one or one of the others. But what was a notable case where you secured the $100 million verdict for an individual client? And what challenges did you face on that?
Fortunate, but at the same time, had the grave responsibility of representing 3 different individuals that the verdict amounted to over $100 million. And each one of those cases was tremendously, tremendously difficult. People think, I didn't get to choose those cases. The defense chose to try those cases. And one of them, they're all so impactful and made so much differences, not only in the clients' lives, but in society. And one of those that I'm still dealing with today in the aspect of safety was Lorenzo Peters. Lorenzo is a 14-year-old teenage boy from North Miami who on a summer day in July was swimming in an apartment pool where his best friend, Tony Boudreaux, lived. And they were playing a game that probably all of us have played where you throw the pennies in the pool, they roll down to the drain, and you go get them. And the drain cover was missing, had been missing for several months. So Lorenzo put his arm in there and his arm got stuck. And his friend Tony tried to pull him out. A number of neighbors jumped in the pool and tried to pull him out. And then a police officer arrived, cut a hose, and tried to deliver oxygen to Lorenzo as Lorenzo became unconscious. Eventually, someone broke into the pool pump room and turned off the pump, and he was freed. And he was catastrophically brain damaged. And when I had that case, we strategized where we resolved the case for the apartment complex, with the pool service company, knowing that the whole time that the ultimate defendant would be the manufacturer of the pool pump. Because we had found out that this was not the first time this happened. It had happened multiple times, hundreds of times throughout the country. And, John Edwards, the former senator and presidential candidate, had handled a case outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, about 6 years before, where a young girl was disemboweled on a pool drain. And I went up to their office for 3 days, went through their file, and discovered just that this evil didn't just result because there's this problem, but that corporate indifference at the highest level of the pool industry existed. And we tried that case, resulted in a $100 million verdict against a company at the time known as Right. They've since been bought out by another company called Pentair. And after that verdict, I literally chased the CPSC, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, around the country. I testified in over 6 hearings, telling them that you have a problem and it can easily be fixed. The pool industry knows about it. I have the internal documents They know that if you simply put a suction vacuum relief device, a sensor, on every pool pump, this will never happen again. It'll sense that someone is stuck. And they fought us. They
Uh,
lied, they lobbied, they lied continually, and it continued to happen. So I ended up having 4 more cases, all death cases, which made me sick to my stomach
oh
because
my gosh.
I knew what was going wrong. And I was on public record. I mean, the CPSC could not stand me, the pool industry. I mean, it was a war. And then what happened, tragically and awfully, is Secretary of State James Baker's granddaughter, Grammy Baker, was 6 years old, and she was killed in a jacuzzi in Alexandria, Virginia. Same pump, same company, 20 people at the party trying to pull her off the drain, and she's killed. The firm handling that case in Virginia brought me in because of my expertise in the subject. But now we had a political player. And
Right.
the Baker family, through not only the secretary, but Grammy's mother, Nancy, was an absolute warrior. They were not going to allow this to happen to another kid. And because it happened to Lorenzo, it happened to all these different people. And we were able to pass a bill in Congress, a bipartisan bill that was signed by George W. Bush, President Bush, that has prevented suction entrapment from happening in the United States for over 10 years. And it's awful that all these tragedies had to happen. But at the same time, it's truthfully one of my proudest moments that this has not happened again, because I believe that's what the civil justice system's for. I believe it's for eradicating this behavior. I tell people, I hope to put myself out of business. I hope
Yeah.
to make the world so much safer that you don't need me because there won't be these tragedies. And I always think of Lorenzo, he had passed away after our verdict, that but for his case, and the others, this never gets done. And right now that bill is being reauthorized in Congress. And so I'm involved in the fight. We've got bipartisan support. We're hoping that we can expand it and provide swimming lessons and to prevent other types of drownings. But we have, knock on wood, eradicated suction entrapment, which was a hard battle, I can tell you.
Like you said, it was an easy fix, but why such the battle? I mean, knowing that there's going to be additional suits that come up because of this.
Well, and the reason was, I mean, it's typical. Whether we can do a movie about it tomorrow. It's the
Mhm.
memo that says there are 3.5 million single drain pools out there, and we would have to retrofit our pumps, and it would cost us X. I mean, we had that memo. I was showing patents. I mean, I couldn't tell you how to research a patent before that case. We had patents from 100 years before showing the technology. I mean, we have all these different. I mean, there are water pump systems you can imagine to
Right.
run cities that have this technology, because if something gets stuck, you can't pump water in or out. That's a catastrophe for a city. You certainly could do that on a little pool. And so we were showing patents. I mean, that's why the jury, I think, was so incensed. But they had settled cases. They had kept, they had done what corporations do. Unfortunately, they were playing the accounting game.
Like you said, we've all done that, right? We've all dove down to the drain growing up, but who would have known?
Yeah. I still to this, well, I guess today's a little different because thank God it hasn't happened. But
Yeah.
even back then, I would tell people and they'd be like, oh my God, I didn't know that had happened. And then, when we did our research, there was a 60-minute
Right.
special on it. Oprah Winfrey had a show on it. I mean, there had been publicity, but it's not easy to reach 300 million Americans. I mean,
Right.
it's, if you could do that, you'd have the secret sauce. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Wow. So one person can make a difference. I mean, like you kept at it.
Yeah, and it's certainly not one person. I mean, I can
No,
promise
I know.
you.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, there was a giant team, but it was something I was not going to let go. I mean,
Mhm.
my wife would say, where are you going today? And I'm like, well, I'm going to St. Louis. Why? CPSC has an open hearing. I'm going to go testify against it. Never invited. I mean, they tried to make sure I wasn't invited. And I remind them to this day. I speak every year at the National Drowning Prevention Alliance. I was on their board. They're folks from that time that are still involved in the space and still involved in the pool industry. And I remind them, because
Mhm.
it's not vengeful, but what you do matters. And when you lobby for an industry like that and you spread falsehoods, I mean, that's a problem. I mean, kids died. I mean, there's just no
Right.
blood's on people's hands, and I don't take that lightly.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, especially, when it comes to children,
Yeah, absolutely.
definitely. Let's do, can you tell us about a case that left a lasting impression, and it may be one of these cases that you're talking about where you provided justice and comfort to the victim's family?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess we've talked about two of those cases. I'll talk about the third, and that involved Lauren Hinton was just under 3 years old. Again, on a beautiful South Florida day, her dad was cooking out in an apartment complex. She was playing hide and go seek with her brother and some friends in the common areas of an apartment complex. And her dad took up the food to their apartment, and some neighbors were kind of watching the kids. And she went through a broken pool gate of the apartment complex. Had been broken, didn't self-close, didn't self-latch. Went to a little ladder, a kiddie ladder that was in the pool, fell in the pool, and was terribly brain damaged. She was underwater for probably 12 minutes, saved by a bystander. And the apartment complex, and more importantly, their insurance company had the opportunity to pay $1 million, which was their insurance policy, and did not. And fought the case, totally blaming the parents. And we tried that case knowing a couple of things. One, they were going to blame the parents and be awful for the parents. Very difficult case because the dad did leave her down in that area. And then maybe most importantly, there was only $1 million insurance. So we would have to win what we call a bad faith case once we hopefully won the underlying case.
Right.
And we were able, again, to get over $100 million verdict, only 1% comparatively negligent on the dad. And then we were able to win the bad faith case. And that case is so important for a couple of reasons. Number one, which is that case now, it happened 20 years ago, and Lauren is still alive. She's 23 years old. She lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Whenever I go to Atlanta, I stop in to see her and her mom, Lori. She needs 24-hour care. She still can't talk. She eats through a G tube. I'm utterly convinced she remembers me and she knows who I am and everything. But the amount of comfort and care we were able to give Lori and Lauren over those years is something that makes it meaningful to be a trial lawyer. But also, we've had so many of those cases since that we're still in that battle for pool fencing, for pool gates, for codes to be enforced across the country. I've handled drowning cases now in probably 25 states, from Minneapolis to California to Virginia to really everywhere. We have one in New York right now. We have one in Las Vegas. And the problem with all that is that the codes aren't being enforced. Again, it's a simple fix. I mean, you're still going to have some type of drownings, but pools, it really shouldn't happen with kids like that, because you can baby-proof, kid-proof pools with fencing and gates. And Lori's the first one that will get on with the client, or more get on with a legislator and talk about how this is so important. And had that gate been inspected, Lauren wouldn't be in that place, nor would some of our cases today.
Right. So how do you manage your legal career alongside your philanthropic work in organizations like the National Drowning Prevention Alliance and the National Crime Victim Bar Association?
I've got a good team. Yeah. I talked about earlier how when I started, I was out there in the street every day. I was investigating. I'm taking 1,000 depots a day, doing all those kind of things. And I love that. I'm here in Jacksonville today, and I'm going to go by a couple of scenes of this terrible Dollar General mass shooting that happened here that we're leading up the case. I love doing that, but you can't do that every day and go talk to legislators and go work on these different issues, whether it's drowning or whether it's gun violence issues. So you got to have a great team. And I have phenomenal partners, Doug McCarran, Todd Michaels, Pedro Charte, who are great trial lawyers, care about their clients, care about all the issues we've discussed. And we have great associates. We have two, senior associates, partners, and Adam Finkel and Kim Wald, who are just phenomenal. I mean, I couldn't ask for better lawyers. Right. And then we have two young guns who, are working 15 hours a day and doing what you got to do. I mean, I always tell everybody, if you do this, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It is not for the faint of heart if you want to do it right, because your family is going to have to know the sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to really understand it. But both my kids are in college right now, and I will tell you, they understand how important it is that daddy fights against the bad guys and for the good guys. I mean, they will tell you that. They've known my clients. They've been to events for March for Your Lives. They've been with the Parkland families because they're that age.
Right.
I mean, they're in that fight with us, and so you got to have a great team to fight the bigger fight. And to me, I wouldn't want to be a regular. I hate to say this, man.
Yeah.
There's a fit for everybody, but I couldn't just be a volume lawyer that's just, I mean, to me, it's got to be about more. And I think that's what's great about my team is they all understand that.
Right. So you mentioned your kids. So either one of them following in your footsteps?
Yeah. So my daughter is a senior at Tulane University, and she wants to be a physician's assistant. So I've lost her to medicine, but she's going to do great there. She's going to save lives. My son, actually, he plays football at Tulane, so he's a redshirt freshman quarterback there. I still have hope that once his football career is done, he might come over to the law, or business may steal him. But
right. What's he majoring in? What's he majoring in?
Business right now.
Okay. All right.
But we need allies. Look, I mean, it's funny. I work with a number of corporations on gun violence safety because I talk to hotels and all these different business owners that if Washington doesn't change our gun laws,
Mm-hmm.
well, then you're on the front line.
Right.
I mean, we have cases against Walmart, but I talk to folks at Walmart all the time in their corporate office about there's no place in the world that's had more mass shootings than Walmart. And some may be their responsibility, but I can tell you this, if the AR-15 wasn't available, Walmart would be a lot safer.
Right.
And that's only got so much to do with Walmart. And so they've actually been I would say a good corporate citizen in that. They don't sell assault weapons. They don't sell high capacity magazines. They have a lot of incentive. They do sell obviously guns, but if everyone did it the way they did, and that was the law in the country, I think we'd be a lot safer.
Right. Wow. So can you discuss your involvement with the Polycystic Kidney Foundation and the personal connection that you have to the cause?
Sure. Polycystic kidney disease is a disease where it's a genetic disease where your kidneys develop cysts and then obviously fail over time. And so that's a disease that runs in my family. My maternal grandmother had it. I never had the opportunity to meet her. My uncle had it. My uncle was transplanted, passed away after that. And then my mom had it, and she passed away and never was transplanted. So I found out in my early 30s, I had some back pain, and really bad back pain. Went to the hospital. I go to a neurologist, get an MRI. Actually, a doctor that I'd had against me in cases, and he treated some of my clients. And he came out and he said, "Well, you got a herniated disc. You're 30-something years old, no big deal." He's like, "But do you have any kidney disease in your family?" And I was like, "Oh my God." So I was diagnosed in my early 30s. And so, lived with it, but got immediately involved in the PKD Foundation. And the PKD Foundation raises money, most of all for research, and then also for advocacy for patients around the world. And so it's going to be 7 years ago Friday, was transplanted. And my wife's brother, who was a Black Hawk pilot at the time, active Black Hawk pilot in the United States Army, was my donor. And so, I'm incredibly fortunate. I'm doing great, but there's a lot of people out there that aren't.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife and I have an event every year. It's coming up in November called Kidney Casino for a Cure. And we've been able to raise, over the years, well over $1 million for the foundation. We obviously give a lot. It's our number one effort, and it's something that can be eradicated. What's interesting about it is the curse of the disease is that's genetic. So my children have a chance of getting it.
Right.
The blessing of the disease is genetic. So we know the gene. We already have one drug that treats it. It was too late for me in the process, but a lot of folks are on that drug. It's doing great, and we have a lot of drugs in the pipeline. And so it's obviously a credible issue
Mhm.
that's close to my heart. And I will tell you, I mean, not only my law firm, but the plaintiffs bar, which I was president of the state trial lawyers in Florida about now 14 years ago. They're the number one givers to the to our foundation. I mean, the PKD Foundation will call me and they'll mention people's names. They'll be like, "Does this person have the disease?" I go, "No, it's just a friend of mine." "Well, why?" "They
Right.
do X." I'm like, "Well, I have good friends." So yes, we're going to get a cure. I mean, we're going to get a drug that's going to do that. And kidney transplant is so important because, unfortunately, folks of all kidney diseases, the first thing they think about is dialysis, and all
Sure.
they're told is
Right.
dialysis or
Hmm.
go on the list. Well, the
Right.
list there's 100,000 people on the list, and people don't understand how easy it is to get a living donor, and all it is a blood match, and so that's something that my wife and I really advocate for. And we've been fortunate that we've convinced about 5 people to be living donors, and
Mm.
I always tell people it's the quickest way to heaven. I mean, it is a automatic ticket. You save a life, you're on God's short list.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, very important.
Wow. What are your future goals in both legal career and your philanthropic pursuits?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right.
Oh, yeah. So, I love our firm and I want our firm to be able to keep not only doing a great job for our clients, but doing the different things that we're doing in society. And so I love what I do. I mean, I
Hmm.
wish I had other hobbies, so every weekend wasn't, doing a bunch of calls, everything like that. I'm hoping that will come. But, I love the place that we're in. Unfortunately, as you and I talked about in the beginning, there's a lot, corporations want to stamp us out,
Hmm.
not only in Washington, but in Florida and other states. And, I really believe that's the obligation of every trial lawyer, that if you have the privilege to go into a courtroom in front of a jury and represent a client, then you have the obligation to fight for that client's rights in the halls of the legislature, whether it's your state legislature or whether it's Congress, because you don't have one without the other. And
Right.
and the problem is that congressmen and legislators, they get in the tort reform battle when it doesn't involve them. But I can tell you, when this happens to their family, they're the first one,
Right. Right.
rightfully so, to want to bring a case. you
Hmm.
know, and I had those conversations with the Baker family. I said, look, George Bush, it's a huge tort reformer in Texas. We've got to educate folks about the Seventh Amendment, which is, obviously in the Bill of Rights, the right to a trial by jury. And then on the other efforts, I mean, obviously PKD and getting a cure to PKD and making transplants so available for
Hmm.
people is something that we work on all the time. But this gun violence problem in the United States of America is something that haunts me. And I'll tell you a personal, also a legal story is, I probably represented more gun violence victims than our firm has than any lawyer in the country. And that's awful, number one. Number two, you sit there and you get incredibly close to your clients. You get involved. We're very involved in Brady. We're very involved for March for Your Lives, all our clients' foundations. And then last year, I wake up one morning and I have 2 calls from the mother of a young man who played football with my son in high school. And these are calls at 4 and 4:30 in the morning. I'd represented her brother in a significant case, so I'm not thinking anything. And I turn on the TV and I see that there's been a shooting at the University of Virginia, and 3 football players were killed. And now my heart sinks because
Right.
Deshaun Perry, who played with my son, played football at the University of Virginia, and he was killed. And I'd never had it happen to someone that I coached, someone that I
Hmm.
knew, and it ripped my heart out. And my client's story has ripped my heart out. But I always tell my clients, one of the shames is I never knew them before. I never
Right.
knew who they
Yeah.
were. Never knew who your son was. Well, I can tell you now, that's actually a good thing to protect you as a trial lawyer, because that's a case that I'm working on right now that is incredibly difficult for me to work on. And
Right. You're
Kim,
so close to it.
yeah, and Kim Wald in my office, knows that. She's literally like my therapist on the case. And I can tell you what's amazing about that is one of the people I've reached out to talk to about that is Manny Oliver, who is one of the Parkland survivors who lost his son, Joaquin. He and I presented in Boston at a conference recently, and he's like the person I could talk to about it because he's been through it. And it's something that cannot happen, and I try to tell everybody that because there's the arguments on this debate make no sense. It's like, this is coming to your doorstep.
Yes.
Gun violence is like cancer. Everyone knows somebody in their family or that has been victimized by cancer. Gun violence is going to be no different. It's the number one killer of people under 18 in the United States of America, above disease, above automobiles, for the first time ever. And there were 300 million guns in the United States prior to the pandemic, and there's 420 million now, and it's not slowing down. And I'm not saying you got to take everybody's gun.
Right.
I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is we need sensible gun laws like every other country in the world has, and some states in the United States do. And the bottom line is they work. This is a uniquely American problem. There is no place on earth that this happens at the prevalency, not even close to the United States. And we can hunt, we can protect our home, we can do all the things that we want to do without AR-15s, without people don't need guns. And so that's something. It's in some ways, I think, maybe an impossible goal, but we've got to do it, because if we don't, I mean, the fact that our kids go through like our parents did, when you go through the bomb drills and you go down to your basement back in the 1950s, it's what our kids do at school for mass shooting drills. It's outrageous. We're the United States of America. So that is something that I'll be working on till there's a solution or I'm no longer with us.
Right. Is there anything else, Michael, before we kind of close this up, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners that you haven't shared already or want listeners to know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you brought up a good point when you said, that you can make a difference. I think I've talked about a lot of problems that we have out there, but, there are solutions. And one of the solutions is all talking together and trying to work together on different things. So I just always encourage people, have an open mind, talk, because no one wants gun violence to happen. I mean, I don't care what side they're
Nobody does, right?
No one does. So we got to find a way to, I always tell people, look, I'll try your solution for 2 years, and then try mine, and maybe we try them together. And let's stop this, because we've got to get back to a society that discusses these things and comes to solutions. And I think as a lawyer, you can have a very, very big impact on that. So that's something that I enjoy. And I tell you, lawyers, it's something you should achieve to do, because you'll have a much more fulfilling career if you're involved in those kind of things.
Yeah. How do our listeners get a hold of you or learn about you and the Heckard Law Firm?
Yeah. So our website is haggardlawfirm.com. And my email is Haggard Law Firm, HAGGARD lawfirm.com. And get in touch with us anytime and on any issue, not only a case, but maybe an issue that from an advocacy standpoint that we can maybe help out with.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Well, thanks for joining us. It's been great to learn about you and your law firm and your endeavors that you do personally and professionally to give back to your community and, to try to help families put some pieces back together, even though, it's never going to go back the way it was, but at least you can give them hope, because a lot of your victims, it takes a lot of money to care for them. Just like you said, the 3-year-old, 20 years. Yeah. That's a lot of money for that type of care. And had they not had you, there's always the default, and it's not the best default, and that. So this has been Michael Clanin with Case Closed Podcast. My guest today was Michael Haggard from the Heckard Law Firm right outside of Miami. It was Coral. What was that, Michael? Coral Springs? Coral Gables. Thank you. So thank you for being our guest today, Michael. And for our listeners, be on the lookout for our next Case Closed podcast. Once again, so thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Case Closed, the Contingency Fee Podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening to this week's guests and their insight. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. Case Closed, the Contingency Fee Podcast, is led by industry experts who unlock insights from the nation's top contingency fee attorneys. Each week on the show, the guests share how they got started, secrets of their success, and what's working in today's marketplace. Guests on the Case Closed podcast include successful contingency fee attorneys that will share their secrets so you can close more cases. Tune in each week for a dynamic conversation about winning legal strategies that will grow your business.